Hello, everyone. Welcome to another interview for Founder Success Stories as part of our community of founders here at startups.com. Being a community-based accelerator, we always want to highlight founders that have achieved specific milestones. And today I've got Justin here with us. He is the founder and CEO of Upfocus. And just too long, did not read, get it out of the way. Spoiler alert, which is great for everybody. He raised $180,000 pre-seed. And for those of you out there who are raising pre-seed and you've been in any of my workshops or you've talked to me, you know how incredibly hard that is to raise money to build a product. Where I heard just today, I was talking to another founder and he said, Ed, when I go to a company website and they say, we invest in pre-seed, it's always whatever stage plus one. So they're not really saying that. It's like if they say we invest in companies pre-seed, they're actually saying seed. If they say seed, they're actually saying seed plus, probably, almost close, like companies verging on A round, etc. And it's just the way the investment environment is. So when I'm talking to Justin, he's telling me that he raised $180,000 to, in essence, build the product. And we'll get into the details right here. I want to have that conversation. I want to find out exactly what he did with Upfocus. And before we dive in a little deeper, you're going to see some things that might be a little different than what we typically teaching founders in terms of the pitch deck, how to raise and what have you, because at pre-seed, everything kind of goes out the door, because you're not talking to institutional money who want their pitch decks to look a specific way. I'm sure Justin has all his different stories out there when it comes to what he was doing pre-seed, but let's just jump right in. Justin, thanks for joining us. I had a very enjoyable conversation with you the other day, and I said, we got to get you on, start talking. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Ed.
Okay.
I can't believe I'm looking at that slide deck now because so much I want to do different.
And these are the things that we want to talk about for sure. So let's walk through, just give a general thumbnail. What is Upfocus, and give a little bit of your background, how you became a founder.
Yeah, absolutely. So Upfocus is intended to be that workflow that happens between the feedback that you get on your product and then what you actually start working on in your project management system, which for most companies, they just kind of wing it. So we're doing for product process what Salesforce did for the sales process.
Gotcha.
And we're focused on startups because big companies solve this with a lot of highly paid product people, and we wanted to give an actual streamlined process for that.
So you saw, your market, so your target customer, your target user was a startup founder, and the underserved need that they have was big companies got all these fancy ways to collect feedback and feed that back into product development. Startup founders don't have that at the early stage. So you said,
Right.
hey, we think we can solve that problem.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
as you know, everybody talks about it. Most startups fail. And
Sure.
the most common reason they fail is a lack of product market fit. But the fact is that you can engineer your way to getting product market fit. It's just, you got to know what you're doing, and you have to do that as a very manual process. So hopefully you have lots of times and resources. And I just felt like that was unfair, and there was an opportunity to level the playing field.
Okay. So you have this in your problem slide, which you just pretty much stated. Product management workflows are too manual and fragile, what you're saying, especially for founders. So it's all about collecting, organizing, prioritizing product ideas. That's manual. Project
Yep.
managers spend hours building, maintaining tools not meant for job. That's manual. And existing tools are few and non-intuitive. I remember using an Excel spreadsheet. Okay,
Yeah.
that's manual, right?
Oh,
So that's the pain point. And we always are telling, how do you get product market fit? Well, you got to get user feedback. You got to get actionable, and you have to be talking to users, shipping product. You are providing that technology, that platform, that backbone for founders to be able to do that so much easier, which is, I know from doing my own and having to raise money, etc. Wow, that's an issue. So you experience this, you've watched people go through it, you're solving that problem.
that's right. And it's generally not that hard to pull off surveying your customers once. Because you in your mind can go, oh yeah, I just got to go, use Google Form, or I'm going to grab this type form or whatever. And I'm going to, get the questions together and I'm going to send this thing out. And then the results come back and you're like, oh, now I have to distill all of this, and once you go through that once, it felt like such an effort. At the beginning, it seemed like it was no big deal, but then at the back end, you realize, wait, that was actually a lot of work. So then you don't do it again. And that's the problem, right? It's a cyclical thing. It's not a one and done. So you got to figure out, what do you have to do to, build the right things for your customers, ship it, run the process again. And if it's not very frictionless, if it's not super easy to do, you just won't do it again.
That's the continuous product development cycle that every founder has to go through.
Yeah.
All right. We would classify you as a SaaS platform. You're in software. So before we get into the raising 180,000 pre-seed, congratulations, by the way, that is no small feat. Who is Justin before Upfocus?
The product person, so I spent my time at multiple startups, started at the early stage of junior sort of product manager. And then by the time I was sort of ready to do my own thing, I had already just spent 2 different back-to-back times as a VP of product. This time at companies that were, in the $15 million to $20 million revenue range. And so I got to see firsthand just how painful it is, even in a company that might have 400 people, to try to get everybody on the same page about what we should build and the evidence trail of what's informing our decisions. And, oh, wait, the roadmap just got waylaid by this escalated issue in the executive team meeting. So that's what I spent the last 10 years doing. And then prior to that, I was working on digital marketing, which is sort of what led me into product management.
Okay. VP product. I think everybody listening really needs to understand this. So Justin has 10 years of domain expertise. VP product, he's seen it. So if you're talking to him, he knows what he's talking about in terms of what startups and companies have to go through in terms of their product development cycles. So you do that, you get to the point. What makes you say, you know what, I'm just going to ditch this swanky job? You probably could, like VPs of product are in demand. Like, that is a pretty good title to have. So what makes you decide, I'm just going to ditch all the security of that and do my own thing?
Yeah. I mean, frankly, it's because the VP of product job sucked.
Wow.
And it's because you end up, whether you like it or not, being an order taker. And I often describe it as like, you're the one person in the room who potentially knows that what we're talking about is an elephant. Everybody else has a different piece. And, you hear all these hero quest stories about the product person, bringing everybody together and being an influencer. And that's just not the reality that most of us experience. Like, most of us actually experience that your strategic initiative just got waylaid by this other thing because it's too hard just to sit here and provide the common picture for everybody so that we all see the same trade-offs. And when I thought about the idea of like just continuing to do that, it just feels like trying to drive the car from the back seat. And
Gotcha.
I was like, no, I'm going to do my own thing and, see if I can make a difference.
Okay. Not only do you have domain expertise, you're living the pain of this. So it's painful for you, painful enough to say, I need to do something about it. So you jump ahead.
Yeah.
Now you raise $180,000 pre-seed. Did you raise that before you had a single line of code, an MVP? Like, what stage was your product at?
Yeah. So essentially, I had the good fortune while I was in that role of getting to know some of the other board members. One of them was an angel investor, Maggie Finch, who I, shortly after going out on my own, had some good coffee conversations with her about, I'd like to do this startup. Here's the general idea. And she's like, that sounds great. I'm just going to tell you the truth that you really have to have some kind of a MVP in order for us to give you money. And because I'm not a minted founder of, having, even though I've worked at many startups, I was not the one responsible for raising the money. And 2 of them exited, but I didn't raise the money. So, you gotta show it and prove it.
Yes.
So I was like, okay. And I knew that I could get some consulting work. And so basically what I did is I did consulting part-time and then worked on the startup with the other part of my time. And myself and a co-founder did that for almost 2 years before we got to a point where we not only had our MVP, but we actually had our first paying customers.
Let's be clear on this. You went out, and I love this story. It gets better the more that I'm hearing it. You go to an angel, you're talking, and you're really exploring on whether an angel will give you money to build a product. The angel says no.
Yeah.
This is just the reality, which is an eye-opening reality for so many founders out there who think that, they just hear the story, and unless you've got the pedigree, unless you have an exit or you previously raised and you're the key person, they're going to want to see that you can prove yourself, that you can actually build something. So you get a consulting job just to pay the bills, which I always recommend. I've done it myself. Then you build a product for 2 years. Then you have something to show, and you have a paying customer for it. And then that's when you raised pre-seed.
Yes.
Okay. So in many respects, a lot of people might call that seed because, we say an MVP truly isn't an MVP unless you're trying to make money with it somewhere. But again, you can validate the market, but you validate it. But yes, you could fall into that kind of pre-seed, which a lot of founders find themselves in, that weird purgatory zone between, pre-seed and seed. So you get this. So then tell me, what did you do to go out and raise that 180,000?
Yeah. So talking to several of my friends about the experience, they've essentially said, Justin, you've had a good network of people that not everybody has, which, when you have it, it's like water, you don't really appreciate it. But so Maggie was one of the first people who I talked to, and then kept her in the loop the whole time. In fact, I just kept asking questions, and I'm fairly certain that the way I went about it is not the right way, which is that I was constantly being transparent and, exposing my hand and trying to figure out, have I gone far enough? Now will you give me money? Essentially. And another person who I had been doing some consulting with, a gentleman named Vic Dougal, he and I had formed a good relationship over the time of doing some consulting. We knew each other before, but then the relationship deepened from doing some work together, and he had actually started to put together a fund. And so I had a couple of people there that I had essentially nurtured that relationship over that 2-year period. And then another person who I knew who was connected to some investing, I reached out to him, and essentially the story of, do you know anyone? And he connected me with a person that was a former product manager at Lyft and Uber. And we did a call and we hit it off. And that was probably the one that was the most, I didn't know this person prior to the conversation, and they genuinely connected with the pain, and then was able to get that round. I know I'm sort of hammering through, so let me give you a chance to ask me questions if you want me to pause.
Let me clarify, because I think there's so many principles, and I just want to repeat. Meanwhile, you're consulting. You're extending your personal runway, because startups don't run out of money. We say this all the time. Will and Ryan say this on the Startup Therapy podcast. Startups don't run out of money. Founders do. So you're extending your runway by doing this consulting. You're networking for 2 years, which we always recommend. You can never, you just don't turn it on. Like, start networking right away. You're at least keeping people posted on what's going on. Now, the individual who introduced you to this person who was, product guy at Uber, etc. Did he just, by the kindness of his heart, say, "Oh, Justin, I really like you, let me introduce you," or did you have to pitch him? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah. He was a friend of mine from a ways back, and just always a sort of supporter, champion. Justin, I know you're going to do something great, kind of a thing. And so it was pretty much out of the goodness of his heart that he made the introduction. But dusting off the memory here, there was a pretty important step.
Okay.
Is that I had to put together essentially the blurb that he used to make the intro.
Gotcha.
And in a very good way, he told me like 3 or 4 times that it was not good. So I had to redo it and get it down to where it was tight. And it was a good conversation of feedback with lots of free flowing swear words, and not angry, but like excited. So yeah, I had to essentially tee him up for success in order to make the introduction.
Okay. So you get the introduction. So then it really is, you're helping the person refer you, which is important, which means you got to have your stuff together. Because if someone's going to spend the social capital to introduce you to someone, you better bring something to the table and invest in that. Yeah. And again, it's hard. I want to help founders, but when founders come to me, do you have any introductions or what have you? Like, I'm like, you're not helping me. You need to help me help you type thing. So you went through that. So then now you're talking to this, individual from Uber who resonated with the problem. Then what happened?
So then, interestingly, even though the other 2 people who I had been nurturing for longer and had more of a relationship with, where they were going to invest in me versus, my traction metrics on my pitch. This one with gentleman's name's Jeff went really quick because his sort of reaction was, I wish I had this software when I was at my job, and actually showed it to like a couple of his sort of former people that reported to him. And they were like, yeah, we wish we would have had something like this. And so that one went really quick. It was like, give him a demo. I think we did like 2 more follow-up calls. And then in all instances, I used a safe note, the sort of Y Combinator safe note. And then, I used PandaDoc to send it over, and he signed it and sent the wire instructions, and oh my gosh, there's money in my bank account.
Amazing. It's got to feel great. That felt amazing.
It was crazy, because this is my first time doing it. So it just felt like magic in terms of that. And then that, of course, became very helpful to go back to the other folks and, hey, Jeff's already first money in, we're ready to get started. What else do you guys need to see to feel comfortable? And that kind of got the ball rolling. And
okay, you knocked over the first domino, and then you told everybody else. And that first domino was a good one, especially with the background that Jeff has. Yes. And the other investors,
which I definitely mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. You want to hammer that over and over again. Great news. It's the thing. Nobody wants to be first, but they kind of want to be first, but they just need a little bit of a nudge, some social proof to say, hey, I was in early on this.
Yeah.
That happens. You ask them, what else do you need to see? What did they say that to get those other checks in?
Yeah. So this is where I started to learn a little bit of the didn't know that I didn't know about investing. And for Vic, it was a matter of like waiting on funds. Because essentially he raises money from other people and then, turns around and invests. And so it was just a like timing mechanics thing for him. And so then once he had the funds available, he made them available. And it was just like a weird feeling of like, I know this is a yes. I know he's telling me the truth. I know this is going to come through, but I just have to sit around and wait. I didn't have to wait too long, but it felt like forever because in this moment. And then for Maggie, she wanted to see me pitch and close some other people. And I don't remember if she said it this explicitly, but essentially the read that I got was, I just want to make sure that I'm not like just overly excited about investing in you and missing, some of the fundamentals of the business. And so I think it was very helpful that the first check-in was from somebody with a product background, which, a pretty common thing that you'll hear from investors is, I'm not an expert in this space, so I kind of need an expert
Exactly.
to help validate, which, by the way, is just like a permanent now part of my playbook. If I go out and raise again, to make sure you get some early money in from people that the non-experts in the space can look at and go, well, if they put money in, then that's a pretty good signal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. And so how many pitches are you doing? Like what's the numbers on this?
Yeah. So, those were my first 3.
Okay.
So I was basically batting 1,000 and had convinced myself like I am good at this. And now I'm just going to go raise a whole bunch more. And so then I started pitching a lot more people where they were an introduction that someone else made. I'd sat through enough workshops from Elliot and folks that I knew, like, try to get some introductions. And so I was getting those introductions. I had some interesting experiences. One was a company that was like, well, we only invest in more like, check sizes of 500,000 to 2 million. Could you take like $1 million? Which obviously, sitting here, the spoiler alert at the beginning, I didn't take the $1 million. And partially because I just recognized like I was not really ready and set up for that. And I knew that it was going to turn into them wanting to get a board seat. And if they were going to get a board seat, then like to do that right, you really wanted to have at least one other person in the mix. And so I just felt like that's just too, I'm not ready.
Yeah. The pressure on that $1 million, what comes with that $1 million? It's enormous, ginormous.
Right.
Yeah.
And I knew that I had some, if I was crawling, I knew I had some walking to do, and they were asking like, how quickly can you run? And I'm like, ooh, I just don't want to feel like I have to start running yet. And then I also had a couple of other folks that one guy was interested in investing, but he told me that, he'll write a check for like 50K, but then you have to hire him as a consultant. And then it turned into this like weird, like, I don't know if this is illegal, but it just feels scammy. And,
Sure.
So I passed on that money.
Which, and I'm glad you bring this up because I never want to throw other people on the bus, but it happens a lot. Very predatory. And yeah, so founder beware. All right.
And then also they had to become an advisor, which basically meant you're getting like double the equity for the money. And then I'm having to give you some back, which is like, I'm not that desperate, bro.
I've been there, looked him in the eye. I've been there. So great. I appreciate you bringing that up.
And then I probably went through about 15 no's.
Mm-hmm.
Of basically the story over and over was you don't have enough traction.
Yeah.
And that's when like I started to kind of recognize something that people had said, which is you have to understand who your investors are and what their investment thesis is. And I just didn't know enough about how to ask the right questions up front. To basically get that if you were buying into my pitch, again, it was based on the idea that you're going to get a great price right now for investing right now, and that there's enough traction here that this isn't a back of the napkin, moment in time. But what they were telling me when I didn't have enough traction was really just that you don't have enough traction for when I like to invest.
Absolutely.
And I wish I would have understood that a little better and knew how to find people who invest for different reasons earlier stage.
Sure. Great lesson to learn. Unfortunately, it's really tough to learn that lesson until you're right in the middle of it. How many times do we tell founders this is the way it's going to go down, just letting you know, and they go, yeah. And then they come back later and the reality stick is, schwacked in between the eyes enough time. I get it. And it's part of the founder journey, especially when you're doing it for the first time. Now, you got 15 no's, but how many outreaches did you have to make to get even those 15 to say no to you?
Yeah. I mean, at least 3 times as many.
Yeah.
And then I did stuff too. Like, I put my pitch and materials up on Angel List, and it's been long enough that I forget all the different sites. You probably know them. But basically, I kind of put my pitch out there.
Yeah.
And even found like a spreadsheet that had a list of different investors, and I tried that, and almost all of that just basically didn't work for me.
Sure.
Then as I was kind of going through my network, I found a couple more folks that ended up also saying yes and writing checks. So I basically raised the money from 5 different people.
Okay.
And 3 of those people wrote me $50K checks. And then I got the remaining amount from the last 2.
Not bad at all. All right. So then I'm gonna show you your deck, and this has kind of been a setup. You're gonna look at it, and absolutely, I cringe, and yeah, exactly. It's just facepalm when I look at my old decks. But I'm curious. So we will look at this. So knowing what you know now, how would you change this slide?
Oh, I only sigh like that because I'm still working on how I change that slide.
Yeah.
A thing that I definitely heard a few times was it works easier because people invest in a thesis. It works easier if you can attach yourself to something larger. And some people, that's a pretty easy thing. Like, oh, I'm part of the no code trend, or, I'm part of the whole like crypto blockchain trend. And I certainly wish that there was the ability to establish what the trend was here. I thought I found it, which was essentially there's been an explosion in entrepreneurship. But like, that's not a thing people had heard of. I could show them like, oh, look at the spike in new businesses from the U.S. Bureau of Statistics.
Sure.
So I wish I'd have had that. And I also just feel like you kind of still need to be a bit of an expert to understand this slide.
Yeah.
And later I ended up started articulating for people, we're doing for product what Salesforce did for sales.
Exactly.
And I think that would have been like a clearer thing to say up front.
Sure. Exactly. And I think that's what I wanted to point out was the people that you talked to knew you as a product manager, understood the game. And so they can resonate with it, which actually there's nothing wrong with it per se, but it does narrow your funnel a bit. Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you for just your humility and willingness to go through this exercise. Okay. So why solve it? Companies can't afford a slow and fragile product workflow. Okay. So you're setting that up. Why now? And so product is more important than ever, and PMs aren't scaling. So actually you're getting better as this goes. You're starting to explain it a lot more, like, software, this is the opportunity. So for me, the slides got better, as we're going through. And then, so introducing the missing link, Upfocus. So here are the benefits. Project manager jobs easier, save time, grow revenue. And then the solution. So like you have a lot of extra slides than typically in the screen, but this is fine. I just want to point out to everybody, this is fine for a deck when you're actually pitching. When we're sending out a screener deck and saying, here's our quick deck, you probably want to keep it to 10 slides and, take all the other stuff out of it. So keep up with feedback from customers and coworkers. So how would you change this now that you've done the pitch so many times? What would you say differently?
Yeah. So I'm working still on nailing my sales pitch, but I just had a great call with a friend of mine who's got a lot of sales pitch development experience, and now I think it would be about there's use cases that are more specific, but the sort of blanket version would be that we help business owners identify why their happy customers buy from them, and then how they can mine insights from them to grow that revenue. And I feel like keeping up with feedback from customers and coworkers, not many people know that they even have this problem.
Sure.
Or like what's the problem of having the problem? What's the consequences? And so that's kind of the like missing teeth for this.
Okay. Yeah, great. So that what you just pitched me in the one sentence hits so much harder, has so many more benefits to it, and itself solves the problem that you had set up, right? Keeping up with feedback, customers, and coworkers is not necessarily explicitly attached to the problem. So what you just did, and so obviously, and again, this isn't a pitch deck critique because this is an old deck, and clearly it was successful enough. I'm not going to knock it because you raised $180,000, right? So continuing on, and I'm just going to gloss over. So this is business cases, and then you're setting it. This is kind of like your magic sauce, your special formula slide. The market, this is really great because 4 billion, okay, that makes sense from a software standpoint. And then you have, and this is bottom up. So you calculate out, here's what we're going to focus on. Again, kudos to you. You did this slide, really well, showed your calculations. And then I'm going to say your SOM, did you get any feedback on your SOM? Because 959 million, that's a big SOM, right there. Any feedback on that? Or were they like, oh yeah, we totally think you can do that?
Yeah. I'll say that one key thing is I'm not sure that I ever fully understood TAM, SAM, SOM
Sure.
the right way is maybe because essentially as your point is like, so wait, you're saying you personally are going to get the 959 million?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. What I'm saying is that if you slice down the part that I am going to focus on as my early adopter crowd, that's how big this addressable portion is.
Sure.
So it's not fully telling like I'm going to capture that part. I'm saying that it'd be something like 100 to 300 million is,
sure,
what I think we could capture, which truthfully would be out of all three of these to get to mine, 100 to 300 million. So this is like I think I still don't know what I'm doing here.
Yeah, you got pretty darn close though. So, the math checks out, but the SOM, so this is just an example for everybody watching. The investors don't know your TAM, SAM, SOM, but they know enough to go, that doesn't quite look right. And I wonder if the founder has done their math. So I'm able to do that, super quick, but it also helps that you did show your math. That's another really great principle. A lot of times people just have, the circle with the 3 segments, and they come down and they show that. But okay. So again, Justin, thank you for totally being gracious with this. So you show some financials, you split out, and this is very detailed, your go-to-market strategy, which is great. And so establish initial product market fit, ready to scale. Okay. So you're self-funded, which is great. MVP complete, product market fit traction. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. And then you got your team, and which is great. and then fundraising goals, use of funds, breaking out, etc. And then you got your thank you. Okay. So generally pretty tight. If you had to go back and now you're kind of thinking like, what's going to be your next step for Upfocus? So let's just recognize you have not arrived yet. You still have a bit to go, but pre-seed, great. What are you going to do to get to your seed round? Or who knows, maybe an A round is right around the corner if everything falls into place. What are you going to do next?
Yeah, I think I am going to go for a seed as my next. And essentially the thing that I want to demonstrate is that I could get the other portion of the business, right? So it's awesome that I was able to make the product. It's great that I was able to sort of demonstrate, early signal on product market fit. But now I have to show that I can consistently grow the customers and that I have a repeatable sort of scalable channel. And so for me, it's all about like driving free trial signups and then converting those into paid customers. And so that's where my like core focus is. I have a potential side path, which is that I have a few other ways of positioning the solution, just to be more specific. One of our customers really helped me understand this, which is they're using this to help them drive their pitch for their next round. They're using our metrics because they've done 2 different product market fit surveys with their customers spaced 6 months apart. And that first one, they got a score of like 46% of people saying that they would be very disappointed to lose their software. And now they're up to like 58%. So big jump over that period. And then we were also able to help them break down what to work on so they can, for their pitch, say, here's evidence of our traction, and how we'll use the funds is we're going to build the things that our customers have told us. So it's data driven.
Okay, perfect segue. So let's just recap. So I'm sitting here as your advisor. What I'm going to tell you is product market fit begins when you've nailed problem solution fit. And so clearly that's happening, but it's about distribution. Is distribution in line? And can you scale that distribution? That's what you're out there to prove. But for you, in the process of solving problems, you're like, hey, wait a second. There's a use case here. There's something bubbling up, and that's helping other companies prove out product market fit, go to investors, and what have you. So let's just reset for a moment and talk about the other founders going to be watching this. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's give some advice out there. Let's work together because you've been through this. So a founder is out there and has built a product. They've got something ready to go, and maybe it's not even a complete product. I'm going to guess that your solution will work even in something like a prototype or something a little with less features, or maybe just jerry-rigged together.
Yeah.
Like a concierge MVP or a piecemeal MVP or something like that. So they've got something that actually can work, and they try to make money. So what advice would you be giving them to get on that track to be able to show investors? And then let's talk about how Upfocus would actually do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, certainly one piece of advice is identify some people whose money you would like to receive because it's coming with them attached, right? And maybe there's like a handful. Like that doesn't have to be a large. This isn't your like pitch list. It's just some friendlies, and make sure you're like communicating with them all along. And I wasn't doing a formal, here's my email every week kind of a thing, or every month. It was just occasionally touching base with them on phone and, or sharing some news, so that's a key piece that I would be doing well before you're, starting the raise. And then the next piece is, we often think we are at a different place than we are. Different people might think that they are further than they are. Some people might picture that they're further behind than they are. So being able to use something like Upfocus to survey your customers and get a benchmark, and this has been done by hundreds of startups. So we know that like the mark that you're trying to hit before you're focused on growth is around 40% of people saying that they would be very disappointed. And so if you're coming in below that,
hang on, redefine
yeah.
that. Disappointed if what?
If they lost access to your software.
Gotcha.
It's measuring satisfaction as a FOMO, which tends to be a lot more accurate than people telling you whether or not they're satisfied directly. That's a whole nother set of science. But
Sure.
So essentially, if you are not at that 40% mark, then you really want to ask yourself, like, what kind of money am I going after? Because you're not ready to grow if you're not at that 40% mark.
Mm-hmm.
You really need to be focusing on dialing in your product market fit. So if you have the wherewithal, the runway to do it, then use the insights that you get, break that down into opportunities in Upfocus, and then push those through to your project management system, run the survey again.
Okay, wait. Now let's just, because what you're saying is pure gold. So let's define it here. So let's say on the continuum of 0% to 100%, this is the disappointment continuum, right? So if the product disappeared tomorrow, how disappointed will you be, right?
Yeah.
Disappointed. I hope I spelled that right. But anyways, so what you're saying is the golden number right now, according to science, is, so if this is 50, this is going to be 40%.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, to me, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the expert in this, but the reason that you typically look, if you look at what do they call, the NPS score, right?
Yeah.
You know, they're looking for 90%. I would refer. This isn't disappointed. This is, this, but let's just use this. The issue is has everything come together? Customer service, and what have you. But here, this is really, up to this point in time, problem solution fit. So is this solution good enough? Is it doing what it says it's going to do, solving your problems? And then from that point on, you're probably going to go into product market fit. But this is that number. And if you are behind it, reevaluate what type of money you're trying to invest. But if you're past it, then you can start making some decisions to target different types of investors. That's what you're saying.
That's right.
Okay.
And essentially what product market fit works as is a leading indicator that you have product market fit. Your trailing indicators are things like, your compound monthly growth rate of your revenue, your net revenue retention, the amount of your users that are monthly active that come back as daily active users. A lot of those sort of classic SaaS metrics that are easy to look at. And if you have product market fit, those things will be lining up at at the amounts that the investors like to see. Product market fit is your leading indicator that you're going to get to those numbers.
Okay. So I can see the reason your people would want your software, because one, I talk to founders and they tell me I got product market fit. I say, how do you know? Web analytics, like I see our traffic. People tell me testimonials and etc. Like, you can't go to an investor with those, because for all we know, those are like pure vanity metrics and you're just not interpreting. So if you actually set up a proper system to survey and observe the behavior, and you got that data, you could, in effect, tell an investor, here's the percentage we're at, here's the feedback, and here's the plan moving forward to inch that up based on actionable real life feedback from real life users, not something that's in my head. That's what you do.
That's right. And whatever you think your main benefit is, the customer is going to tell you in their words, the ones that are happy, what your main benefit is. And so now you can start to, think about your positioning. What is it that we do? Why do people buy from us? Our customers who are happy have told us it's for these reasons. And here's how we're going to keep our eye on that ball and double down on making those things better. And then for our ones that are on the fence, that are only somewhat disappointed to lose our software, here's what they said: if we improve, that'll convert them into happy customers. And so those two sets of opportunities that we just identified from doing this process are going to be what we use this revenue on, or this investment on. And then you're ready to kind of keep doing that over and over.
You're telling me all those times that I hired a person specifically to send out a survey, knock on people's doors or their email boxes, can you please answer this? Can I ask you, etc., and dedicated someone full time, and then put it on a spreadsheet and us have try to interpret it? You're telling me I could have avoided all that pain if I had Upfocus. That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. Now what you can do is you can just you can still send this by survey,
Sure.
by email, but we also embed in your app. So it's just a single line of JavaScript. And then we take care of the logic of making sure we don't serve that person until they've been a customer for at least 2 weeks. And if they dismiss the survey, then, it goes away for 90 days. If they fill it out, we don't survey them again for a year, all that kind of stuff. We just take care of it. And then that information comes in, we break it into topics. We give you an experience to do that. Upcoming, we're going to have an auto topic extraction, which will be fun to talk about. So to literally process it for you. And then that's what you can kind of turn around and make your plans on.
Okay. So it's like creating a smarter platform for predictive product market fit is what you're saying.
Right. As one of my customers said, they love their app analytics because it tells them what customers are doing, but it doesn't tell them why. And
Gotcha.
so this fills in the why.
Okay. For the sake of people going to be watching this is a common question. I'm going to be answering it in workshops, but I'd love your professional opinion. How much traction? So for example, I could go out, let's do an extreme case. I go out and survey one person, happens to be my mother, and she is like, oh, I would be, he's my son. He's kind of a pain. I'd be 50% disappointed. Let's, just be realistic. I'm like, I got past the 40%.
Yeah.
How much product market fit? How much feedback data? How many users are you seeing that startups need to be able to get the attention of investors? How much should they be targeting?
To get their attention, you're hoping to have 40 to 50 responses.
Okay.
And your percentage will be the number of them that answer very disappointed. So they're only allowed to say very, somewhat, or not. And so you're hoping that out of that, 20 to 30 of them are going to say they would be very disappointed to lose your software.
Okay.
So you don't have to send it to more people than that 40 to 50.
Okay.
They don't necessarily all have to be like, if you have multiple people, let's say you are in a B2B space and, one account has multiple users, that's okay. Like counting all those users is also helpful.
Yes.
So that's what you really need for an investor to take your results seriously. For you as a company, if you're trying to dial in your product market fit, any amount of literally one person telling you that they would be very disappointed is all you need to start to follow the scent of what is it that they like and how do we make that better, and how are they talking about what our benefits are, and using that to inform your upcoming decisions.
Perfect. So we tell founders all the time, just make one user happy, right? Make something one user will love to use and makes them fall in love with your product. Make one user happy. And then on top of which, try and make $1. If you can do that, you can figure out how to make a million users happy and make $1 million, which is the opposite of someone be, or it's the same thing. You're saying it in inverse, that someone would be incredibly disappointed if they didn't have a product. So think about it this way. Like say I go out and I send out to 10 people and 9 people are like, nah, I wouldn't be disappointed at all. Right. But the one person says, I would die without this product. Now we can go analyze that one user and say, wait a second, what did we do right with this one user that, and what's different about this one user versus all the rest? And you can start to hone your strategy. That's what you're talking about.
That's exactly right. In fact, once you're at the growth stage where now, you've hit your product market fit number and you're starting to grow it, it's based on the idea of lookalikes of the people who are happy.
Perfect.
Is who you're trying to land as customers. And then you're surveying again after you've started that first batch of growth customers to see, are we still standing up?
Perfect.
And do we need to pivot or nuance or refine again? So it's a constant cycle of learning.
And this is great. I think this is very helpful for founders because I was expecting you to say thousands of customers, but really just for the data and to move that continuous product development cycle along. You really only need one, but 50 is pretty good to be able to show other people. There's a science behind that. Obviously, for growth and it really signify you've achieved product market fit. You want to be in the tens of thousands of users, and I've seen funds say who do seed rounds now say you need to make 1 million ARR. Like that's the investment thesis. That's up to them. But for the founder, 50, we're good.
Yeah. If you have 50 responses, then the thing that we hear from our customers is, okay, now I feel confident about what I'm going to build. And oftentimes what comes out, it's not like they hadn't ever heard of these things. It's that several of them sounded like great ideas, and they were either going to spread their resources thin, trying to get them all, or they just weren't moving forward with the swagger that you get when that's the thing. Like, we need to work on this, and we can all feel comfortable, confident, putting our real energy into this and saying no to some of this other stuff. That's the key value. And then when you get to ship that and do your next cohort, seeing the impact that it has is, very thrilling.
Okay. I always say this to all my founders that I talk to, but specifically with this, I bet you we could talk all day. You could give me a master class on product management and different things, real fascinating stuff. You really are going to be the expert for founders when they come and they say, do I have product market fit? Don't I have product market fit? Is it pointing in the right direction? At least am I even in the stadium to play the right sport, like type thing. So thankfully you're part of our community. You're a community leader. I want to highlight that and say thank you very much. Founders can come talk to you about it. You're more than happy to help them. Now, if people want to try your software, you have a special offer for founders. What is that?
Oh, you can try it for free for 30 days.
For 30 days. And what are they going to get out of those 30 days? Let's just be really, tactical.
Yeah, that should be more than enough time for you to be able to run the full product market fit survey, process the results. And then some of those are going to be small and like obvious things that you can just start to work on. Some of them will expose some bigger ones. And so you might put together a proposal inside the software. And then you're ready to start to implement it. We've definitely had people who do the free trial, let it expire, ship whatever it was, sign up for the free trial again. Then when that works, it's like, okay, let's keep this thing going, so you can hack our system that way.
Okay. Well, let's not focus on that too much. If you get something actionable, let's move them along. Plus you're giving workshops. So you're a fountain of information. That's what I really appreciate about you. It's the reason I want to talk and how accessible and approachable you are. I really appreciate you taking this time. And final word, what would you say as a last word of encouragement for anybody listening?
Yeah. I mean, raising money is not easy. Finding product market fit is not easy. And it's really a lot about be systematic in how you do it, and eventually it'll pay off.
It's not easy as is, but it doesn't have to be as hard as it is for a lot of founders. That's what I got.
Yeah, that's
All
right.
Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, thanks, Ed.